Bonnie Plunkett spent 8 seasons on Mom lying, scheming, manipulating, and making jokes at precisely the wrong moment. She was the bad mom, the woman who, by her own daughter's account, was cooking drugs while other mothers were cooking dinner. And for a while, that's the whole picture. She's comic relief. She's the reason Christy is in therapy. She's the punchline. Except here's the thing that changes everything once you actually sit with it. Every single thing Bonnie does, every deflection, every scheme, every joke fired off in the middle of a serious conversation, every moment she physically cannot stay in a room where someone is being genuinely vulnerable. All of it makes complete sense the moment you understand one fact about her life. She was 4 years old when her mother left her at a foster home, promised she'd come back, and never did. Not in the complicated, she tried her best sense that gets handed out to parents who failed. Literally dropped her off. Made a promise, broke it. And Bonnie, who was 4, waited. Everything that comes after is just a person trying to survive what that taught her about the world. Let's actually lay out what Bonnie's childhood looked like. Because the show mentions it in fragments, in backstory, in the kind of lines that get a dark laugh and then the scene moves on. But when you put it all together, it's staggering. She wasn't placed in one foster home. She was in 12. 12 different houses, 12 different families, 12 different sets of rules that applied to someone else's children, and she was just the temporary one passing through. She was kicked out of all of them, every single one. By 16, she was on her own. By 18, she was an addict with a criminal record. She had been alone and surviving since she was barely old enough to drive. At 15, she ran off with a man named Alvin. At 17, she was pregnant, and then, on Christmas Eve, in a hospital, hours after giving birth, Alvin left, just walked out. Left her and a newborn in a hospital corridor on Christmas Eve with nothing. And here's the moment that most people don't give enough weight to. Bonnie almost gave Christy up. There was a couple there, a nice couple, ready to adopt. The paperwork existed. The easier path was right in front of her. She had nothing, no money, no support, no plan, no history of anyone staying. Every piece of evidence available to her said that she was not equipped for this. She kept her anyway. She looked at this baby who had just been abandoned by her father and Bonnie, who knew, better than almost anyone alive, what it felt like to be the person left behind, could not do it. She backed out. She took Christy home. That is the most important thing Bonnie Plunkett ever does in the entire run of this show, and the show treats it like backstory. Now here's what I want you to actually think about, because this is where it stops being just sad and starts being psychologically interesting. Bonnie spent her entire childhood being moved. Every time she started to settle, she was gone. 12 times the floor dropped out. 12 times she learned that comfort is temporary and attachment is a trap. When you grow up like that, when you are 4 years old, and the one person who was supposed to be permanent proves she isn't, you learn something about love that most people never have to learn. You learn that wanting things is dangerous, that needing someone is the fastest way to be destroyed, that the only truly safe move is to want less, need less, feel less, or at least to make absolutely sure nobody ever sees that you feel anything at all. That is Bonnie's entire personality, explained. The jokes at the wrong moment, the inability to sit in genuine emotion for longer than about 30 seconds before she has to puncture it with something. The arrogance, the absolute certainty she is right about everything even when she is catastrophically wrong. The scheming, the lying, the manipulation, these are not character flaws floating in space. They are the defense system of someone who learned at 4 years old that the world does not hold. And she built herself into someone it would be very, very difficult to hurt. The problem, and this is the real tragedy of Bonnie Plunkett, is that the same wall that keeps the pain out also keeps everything else out too. Which brings us to Christy, and this is the part that the show handles with more honesty than I think it gets credit for. Bonnie did to her daughter something close to what her mother did to her. Not exactly. She didn't leave, but she wasn't there either. Christy raised herself, while Bonnie was using and drinking and making choices that put her own survival above everything else. Christy was at home learning to be her own parent, learning to cook, learning to manage, learning that she could not rely on the person who was supposed to be the adult in the room. And then they both got sober, and then they had to figure out what they were to each other. Here's what makes Mom unusual for a network sitcom. It doesn't make this easy. It would have been so easy to make this easy. Bad mom gets sober. Daughter forgives her. They hug. Credits roll. But the show keeps the difficulty in it. Christy's resentment is real and it stays real. The things Bonnie did to her are not undone by sobriety. And Bonnie, who has spent her entire life avoiding accountability because accountability means sitting still, and sitting still means feeling things, has to actually live inside that. There's a scene in season 6 where Christy gets a bad flu, just a flu, and Bonnie is so consumed by the urge to take care of her that she cancels tickets to an Eagles concert with Adam. She just bails on it. She stays home and mothers her sick daughter. It's played as a small, funny moment. Bonnie being dramatic about wanting to be the one who brings soup, but sit with what that actually is. Bonnie Plunkett, who ran from everything, staying home to take care of her sick kid, making up for lost time the only way she knows how, which is badly and loudly, and in a way that is slightly too much because she never learned the normal version. That's not comedy. That's a woman trying to retroactively be a mother. Now here's where it gets really dark. And this is the part that fundamentally changed how I understand this character. Season 2. Bonnie relapses. It starts with a back injury, a legitimate prescription for pain medication, the kind of relapse that doesn't look like a relapse at first because there's a doctor's note involved and everyone wants to believe she's fine. She isn't fine. She ends up arrested for driving under the influence. She hits rock bottom again, just when she'd started to build something. And the show does something in the aftermath of that relapse that I didn't expect from a CBS sitcom. Bonnie is alone in a room, coming down, and she asks God for help. She argues with herself. She bargains with whatever she has left. Different sides of her personality fighting it out. And then, in this kind of surreal moment, Jesus appears from the bathroom and tells her she can do this. The show pulls back and makes it ambiguous. Maybe she was asleep, maybe it was a dream, but that scene matters because it is the only time in the early seasons that we see Bonnie completely without armor. No joke, no scheme, no performance. Just a person who has failed again at the thing she most desperately needs to get right, trying to find something to hold on to. She gets back up. She starts over. She doesn't relapse again. That's not nothing. In a show full of people in recovery, Bonnie's sobriety is the most hard won because she doesn't have the same relationship with vulnerability that the program asks for. Every single step of AA requires exactly the thing that Bonnie Plunkett spent her entire childhood learning not to do. Admit you need help. Be honest. Let people see you. Trust that they'll stay. She does it anyway, imperfectly, with a lot of jokes and deflection and schemes along the way, but she does it. Then there's her mother. And this is the moment the whole show turns on, I think, even though it's treated like a subplot. In season 3, Bonnie's biological mother contacts her out of nowhere. This woman, who left a 4-year-old at a foster home and never came back, who built a whole separate life and had another child she actually raised, shows up wanting a relationship. Bonnie goes to meet her. Let's be clear about how remarkable that is. Given everything, given the 12 foster homes and the abandonment and the life she has been building around never needing anyone, she goes. But she can't forgive her. Not in the way that means letting her back in. Marjorie convinces Bonnie that forgiveness is for herself, not for her mother. And Bonnie genuinely tries. She gets there, kind of. But then she makes a decision that is quietly the most psychologically mature thing she ever does in the whole show. She forgives her mother, and then she decides she can't have her in her life. Think about what that takes. To understand the difference between forgiveness and proximity. To be able to say, I'm not carrying this anymore, And also, you do not get access to me. That's not weakness or coldness. That's someone who has done real work on herself, even when it didn't look like it. Her mother dies shortly after, and in the wreckage of her mother's life, Bonnie discovers she has a half-brother named Ray, a successful lawyer, rich, apparently has it all together, until Bonnie figures out he's a drug addict whose perfect life is a facade, and here's what she does. She tells him she loves him, and then she kicks him out so he can hit his own rock bottom and find his way back. She does for her brother the thing nobody ever did for her. She sees through the performance to the wreckage underneath, because she knows exactly what that performance costs, because she has been performing her whole life, and she knows that the only way through is through. The relationship that changes everything, though, is Adam. Adam Janikowski is a retired stuntman who is paralyzed from the waist down. He dials a wrong number. Bonnie answers. Something starts. He stands her up on their first date, not because he isn't interested, because he is, and he is intimidated, and he's scared that she won't be able to handle what his life actually looks like. She finds out why she was stood up. Christy pushes her to give him another chance. She goes back, and I want you to understand why that is the tell. That is the single most revealing thing Bonnie does in the first half of this show. Because someone who is genuinely as self-contained as Bonnie pretends to be, someone who truly does not need anything from anyone, would never go back. Walking away first is easy. That's the move she's been making her whole life. Walking away first means you never have to find out if they were going to leave anyway. Going back is the terrifying thing. Going back means you want something. Going back means there is something here to lose. She goes back. And Adam, who has his own understanding of a body that doesn't do what it's supposed to, who has spent his own time adapting to a life that went differently than planned, somehow gets past the thing nobody else ever reached. He sees her, and he stays. And she lets him. They get married in season 6, which, for Bonnie Plunkett, is the most radical act of the entire show. Not the sobriety, not the forgiveness, not the AA speeches, the marriage. The decision that she is going to be someone who stays. And then comes the finale. Adam is diagnosed with lung cancer. He tells Bonnie, braced for whatever her response is going to be. And Bonnie, who for the entire run of this show has been the person who leaves rooms, who deflects, who makes a joke and gets out before anything gets too real, doesn't run. She stays where she is. She tells him they'll get through it together. And then she does something she has never done before. She turns to her friends and she tells them what's happening. Not alone, not running, not performing competence. She reaches out. The showrunners talked about this in interviews. They made a deliberate choice not to have Bonnie relapse in the face of this. Because the whole show, they said, is about showing that it's possible to face the worst things sober, with support, together. And they contrasted it explicitly with how Bonnie handled Alvin's death in season 2, where she went off alone, where she nearly drank, where she ended up relapsing on medication months later. The difference between those two moments is 8 seasons of Bonnie Plunkett slowly, painfully, imperfectly learning how to let people in. The last line of the show belongs to her. She's at a meeting. There's a newcomer who is resistant, who doesn't believe any of this works, who looks exactly like every version of Bonnie from before. Bonnie stands up. My name is Bonnie, and I'm a grateful alcoholic. And if that pisses you off, keep coming back. She's not fixed. She's not healed. She will never be the mother Christy deserved when she was 7 years old. The show doesn't pretend otherwise, and neither should we. But she's grateful. She's sober. She has a husband who stayed and friends who showed up, and a daughter who became a lawyer, and a version of herself that she built from scratch because the original version, the 4-year-old left at a foster home, never got the chance to become anything at all. Here's what I think Mom is actually about. Underneath the laugh track and the AA meetings and the Bonnie one-liners, it's about what happens to a person when they spend their entire childhood learning that love is temporary. And then it's about what happens when that person spends their entire adulthood slowly, badly, imperfectly trying to unlearn it. Bonnie is not a good mother in the traditional sense. She wasn't there. She made choices that damaged her daughter in ways that took years to even name properly. The show never pretends otherwise. She is also a woman who was a 4-year-old girl standing at a door that didn't open again. She is also a woman who, when she stood in a hospital corridor on Christmas Eve with a newborn and nothing else, looked at the easier option and didn't take it. She kept Christy. She stayed. Badly, sometimes destructively, always imperfectly, but she stayed. And she has been trying to become someone worthy of that choice ever since. So maybe Bonnie Plunkett isn't the character Mom asks you to love first. And she is absolutely the hardest one to defend. But she is the one the whole show quietly turns on. Because underneath everything, the schemes, the jokes, the absolute refusal to be seen wanting anything, Bonnie is doing something that requires more courage than anything else in this show. She is learning, very late and with a lot of wrong turns, how to stay, which might be the hardest thing that a person who was left at 4 years old can ever learn to do. If this video made you think about Bonnie differently, subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And let me know in the comments, did you root for her from the beginning, or did she have to earn it?